At the third engagement banquet, Ethan was called away by a phone call from Michelle. He said, "Michelle has attempted suicide, how can you still be in the mood for an engagement?" To avoid provoking Michelle, there was no wedding ceremony later on, they only secretly obtained the marriage certificate. He said, "Don't be so vain, those formalities are just for outsiders to see." Later, when I went into premature labor and suffered heavy bleeding, after receiving Michelle's call, he left me by the roadside. He said, "The ambulance will arrive soon, I have to go save Michelle first." In this reborn life, I am no longer obsessed with marrying Ethan. Reborn at the third engagement banquet. Michelle has attempted suicide, how can you still be in the mood for an engagement? Ethan forcefully shook off my hand, but I suddenly smiled. His expression froze, and a trace of confusion and panic flashed in his eyes. Looking at the familiar scene before me, my entire heart trembled with excitement. Thank God for giving me a chance to start over. I avoided Ethan's extended hand and looked at him seriously, saying, "Go ahead, I won't stop you." Perhaps my change was too abrupt, Ethan sighed helplessly, softening his voice, "It's a matter of life and death, wait obediently for me to return." With that, without waiting for my response, he turned and hurried away. I wiped the tear stains from my face and removed the veil from my head. After changing clothes, I smoothly proceeded to cancel the engagement. My best friend Vivian was overjoyed to learn that I would go abroad to work with her, but she asked suspiciously, "You won't regret it, will you? If that scumbag turns around and says a few nice words, will you eagerly forgive him again?" The previous me would indeed have done so. But after experiencing the previous life, I had long given up. Although we had depended on each other for over 20 years, walking together from the orphanage to today. I crossed my arms and firmly denied, "Don't judge people with old perspectives. He and I are already in the past, one must look forward." Vivian gave me a thumbs up, worthy of praise, men are not as important as making money. She took me to her family's most luxurious bar to celebrate our bright future in advance. In my previous life, I rejected Vivian's job invitation. Not long after the third engagement banquet was ruined, I married Ethan as I wished. There was no proposal, no wedding photos, and no ceremony. We just secretly obtained the certificate. He said, "Don't be so vain, those formalities are just for outsiders to see." I couldn't help but post the marriage certificate on Facebook, and that same day, Michelle jumped into the river and was hospitalized. Ethan angrily slapped me and roared, "Are you trying to kill Michelle? You know she has depression." But I had clearly said it to be visible only to him, how did Michelle see it? I was shocked and disappointed. The person who once swore to protect me for life became the first to slap me. I began to examine our relationship, but unexpectedly became pregnant. The arrival of new life and the longing for a family reignited my hope. Ethan also apologized to me, saying that the one he loved was me, and his feelings for Michelle were just sympathy. He promised to send Michelle abroad after her graduation, allowing me to resign and focus on the pregnancy in peace. Filled with anticipation, I began preparing the nursery, reading parenting books, and discussing baby names with Ethan. Everything seemed to be improving. Until a colleague told me that Michelle had joined the company, replacing my position. The job that was supposed to be reserved for me was easily given to Michelle. Seeing the intimate interaction photos sent to me, I clutched my stomach and couldn't help but retch. It turned out that Ethan didn't let me go to the company to deliver meals not because he was concerned about my pregnancy discomfort. He had no time to accompany me for prenatal checkups, yet he had time to celebrate Michelle's graduation by flying to Finland to see the Northern Lights. I felt sorry for his hard work overtime, but he was busy taking Michelle to banquets and introducing her to clients. I questioned him hysterically, but he said, "Look at your shrewish appearance, I hid it from you, wasn't it for your own good? I don't understand, Michelle is so pure and kind, why can't you tolerate her?" I broke down in tears and smashed everything in the room. Finally, I used the child to force him to choose between me or Michelle. Ethan was terrified, holding me and swearing never to see Michelle again. At 7 weeks pregnant, in the middle of the night, my stomach cramped in waves, and blood stained the bedsheets. Ethan didn't even have time to put on his shoes, holding me and driving to the hospital. Midway, he received a call, slammed on the brakes, and left me by the roadside. Before leaving, he said apologetically, "Bear with it. 911 will arrive soon, I have to go save Michelle first." Before closing my eyes on the operating table, I recalled the received text message, "You lost again, he still chose me." A tear slid from the corner of my eye. At that moment, I truly regretted it. In this second chance at life, I must not repeat the same mistakes. Inside the high-end private room of the bar, Vivian arranged all the expensive wines and called a few handsome guys for massages and foot rubs. After discussion, we booked tickets for the 3rd of next month. She needed to handle some work matters, and I needed to complete my work handover. With 1 month left, we could leave this place of troubles. We raised our glasses in celebration, ambitious about our grand career plans overseas. Returning home, as soon as I opened the door, I saw Ethan. He came out of the bathroom, his hair still dripping wet, with a bathrobe loosely draped over him. Michelle was sitting on the sofa. Upon seeing me, she abruptly stood up, timidly saying, "Sister, I'm sorry, I didn't intentionally ruin your engagement banquet today." The blush on her face was particularly alluring, and she was wearing my thin nightgown, exuding a pitiful little white flower vibe. I sneered, and Ethan immediately stood in front of her, frowning at me and saying, "Michelle just lacks security, it's not her fault." "So it's my fault then? Blame me for coming back and interrupting your good time?" I sharply glanced over, and Ethan's body visibly stiffened. Guiltily but stubbornly, he said, "Why is your mind so dirty? Wearing your clothes, do you have to be so sarcastic? It's all because you insisted on having the engagement banquet, scaring Michelle to the point of almost jumping off a building. Let her stay here for a few days, take good care of her, and consider it making amends." Ethan spoke more and more self-righteously, and Michelle behind him looked at me smugly. In the previous life, Ethan used getting the certificate as an exchange condition, and I reluctantly let her stay. Hearing these words again in this life, I just found it amusing. I rolled my eyes dramatically, pointed to the open door, and said, "Get out." Both looked stunned. Michelle's eyes reddened first, and she said to Ethan, "It seems sister really hates me, brother Ethan, I'd better leave." Before she could take 2 steps, Ethan grabbed her wrist. "How did you become so cold-blooded? Are you trying to force Michelle to death?" Ethan said angrily. "Michelle is so pitiful, all alone, she's the one I sponsor, so isn't it only right for you to help me take care of her?" Having drunk a bit too much, my temples throbbed with pain. I took a deep breath and impatiently said, "You get out too." "You," Ethan widened his eyes in disbelief. Seeing my indifferent expression, he turned livid with anger, pulled Michelle, and stormed out. He turned back wanting to say something, but I slammed the door shut. The next day, I woke up from the hangover at noon. Fortunately, it was Sunday, no need to work. After a simple tidy-up, I listed this wedding house with an agent. Since I'm leaving, I'll leave cleanly. Looking around this wedding house, how happy I was when decorating it back then, now it's just as disgusting. I still remember when buying the house, Ethan insisted on putting only my name on it, saying, "If I make you angry in the future, you can kick me out." Back then, it felt sweet, now, only bitterness remains. I took out the suitcase, packing only a few clothes and important documents, the rest I had people come to recycle. Including those necklaces and gifts Ethan had given me. From the drawer, I pulled out a photo album filled with our photos from childhood to now. Burning what I once cherished actually brought a sense of relief. Also, everything related to Ethan on my phone was deleted cleanly. How much the previous me longed to marry him, now, I'm just as grateful we haven't gotten the certificate yet. Now, only resignation remains. Once the work handover is clear, I can leave with peace of mind. In the evening, I arranged to have dinner with Vivian and ran into Ethan at the restaurant. Seeing me, he snorted coldly and turned away, looking like he was waiting for me to coax him. I pulled Vivian and left. He was furious. Ethan chased after and blocked me, explaining eagerly yet awkwardly, nothing really happened between me and her. Last night was because she threatened suicide and insisted on giving herself to me. Michelle really lacks love, she cried for so long, go apologize to her. I laughed in anger, held back the furious Vivian, slapped him, and said, if your brain is sick, don't infect me. If you feel so sorry for Michelle, just marry her. Pushing away the stunned Ethan, I could still smell the cloying perfume on him. It was Michelle's scent, who knows what happened between them last night. If I hadn't gone back last night, perhaps Ethan couldn't resist Michelle's tears and ended up in bed with her. I don't know how brainless I was in the previous life, even when the mistress came to the door, I didn't get angry. Vivian and I entered the private room, discussing plans after going abroad while eating. She was sent abroad by her father, fearing she would compete with her half-brother for the family fortune. In the previous life, after she went abroad, we reduced contact, and I don't know how she fared after my death. But in this life, I will be with her, fighting side by side. Hearing that I wanted to sell the house, Vivian said she knew a foolish rich second generation who happened to need one. After eating, when we went out, Ethan was still waiting outside. He looked aggrieved, as if I was the one who cheated. A good dog doesn't block the way. My good mood was ruined instantly, I just wanted to kick him aside. His eyes reddened suddenly, and he hurriedly pulled me, saying, I know you mind Michelle, shall we get the certificate tomorrow? Sneakily, without telling Michelle? I smiled self-mockingly. Ethan nodded subconsciously, of course, you know she has depression and can't be stimulated. In the previous life, it was because of getting the certificate that I ended up with one corpse and 2 lives. Now hearing about getting the certificate, my heart still ached sharply. I gripped Vivian's hand tightly, took a deep breath, and said, I should have formally notified you yesterday, let's break up. Ethan was stunned and unconsciously let go. His whole body stiffened there, his expression filled with shock, confusion, sadness, and resentment. Seeing that my expression wasn't joking, he was so angry that his chest heaved violently, and veins bulged on his forehead. After a long while, he laughed out loud, gnashing his teeth, don't regret it. Then he stumbled away. But I felt relieved, as if a stone in my heart had fallen. In 10 years of love, we never mentioned breaking up. Because we were not only lovers but also each other's only family. Once spoken, there's no going back. In this life, Ethan and I are destined to drift apart. Later, I went to work as usual, busy with the last project at hand. Ethan no longer looked for me, he arranged Michelle into the company and often paraded her in front of me. Soon, everyone knew we had broken up. The company was abuzz with discussions, and some opportunists were already eagerly flattering Michelle. But my close colleagues at the company were happy for me, she said, you should have let go when the first engagement banquet was ruined. At the first engagement banquet, I was so happy I shed tears, but Ethan didn't even show up. Because Michelle left a suicide note on Facebook, if your happiness isn't me, what's the point of living? Accompanied by a picture of a bleeding wrist. At the second engagement banquet, I was uneasy throughout, until the ring was already on my fingertip, but Ethan let go. The ring rolled to the ground, looking up, only Ethan sprinting back remained. Michelle got drunk at a bar and was harassed, one call pulled Ethan away from the ongoing engagement ceremony. I was unwilling, but the third engagement banquet had the same result. Working overtime at night, I checked the time, it was past 11. The company was already empty. As I was about to pack up and leave, Ethan came in holding a small cake. His brows and eyes were gentle. I vaguely remembered today was my birthday. But my memory drifted to this day in the previous life, our first birthday after marriage. I attached great importance to it and saw the necklace I had long admired hidden in his drawer. I specially took leave and made a table of his favorite dishes at home. But what came was him accompanying Michelle to my favorite singer's concert. In Michelle's Facebook, the handsome man and beautiful woman, and she was wearing that diamond necklace around her neck. Right, how could I forget that Michelle and I share the same birthday? In the end, I also received an identical necklace, but it was a fake. Every year, I accompany you on your birthday, this year is the same. Ethan said with burning eyes, smiling. Memories returned, and I sneered. What? Buy one get one free for the birthday cake you bought for Michelle? Unfortunately, I find it dirty. What does it have to do with Michelle? Why is your heart always so dark? No wonder no one celebrates your birthday. Ethan frowned and said. My healing heart was cut again. Just as I wanted to retort, Ethan's phone rang. Brother Ethan, come save me quickly, ah. No. Michelle's voice was particularly clear in the quiet room. Ethan panicked, threw the cake, and rushed out. Looking at the smashed cake on the ground, I couldn't help but scoff. It's just a cake. If no one celebrates my birthday, can't I do it myself? Back home, the cake was delivered. I lit the candles for myself, sang the birthday song, wished myself happy birthday, and also wished for my rebirth. Finally, I captured this beautiful moment with a Polaroid. Before sleep, I received Vivian's Facebook message, "Happy birthday, baby," accompanied by a transfer of $52,000. She said she was too busy with work and would make it up another day. Also, close colleagues and a few friends sent blessings. See, it's not that no one celebrates my birthday. It's just that the previous me was too centered on Ethan. Leaving Ethan, I can live better. After the project was successfully completed, I breathed a sigh of relief. I still have feelings for this company that we built together. The company was filled with joy, everyone was congratulating me. Securing this project, the director position is definitely Aria's. Everyone was looking forward to the celebration banquet. I shook my head helplessly and smiled, without spoiling the mood, mentioning my resignation. I just handed over all the resources and work to Grace. She knew I was leaving, with reluctance, but more blessings. Grace handed me a cup of coffee, sighed, and said, thinking back, when the four of us started the business together, how good it was. Now you're leaving too, I don't know how long I can stay. Her gaze looked out the window. I patted her hand comfortingly and said, when I become big and strong, I'll poach you with a high salary. Okay, I'll wait. She smiled and left. But her back looked a bit lonely. Initially, Grace and another partner in the company had a long-term relationship. The wedding date was set, but the other party told her he wanted to reunite with his first love. After he left, Grace couldn't get over it for a long time. Matters of emotion are unclear and inexplicable, with no first come, first served. I submitted my resignation application. The HR department was surprised, then understanding. Now I'm just waiting for approval. I don't care for the director position, but I can't let it go to Michelle like in the previous life. It can only be Grace's. If Ethan wants to protect Michelle, it depends on whether the board agrees. During the wait for resignation approval, I arranged to gather with a few close friends. Everyone knew about my breakup with Ethan and felt emotional. I also took time to return to the orphanage, gave the dean mother some money, and played games with the children for a while. She still remembered Ethan, asking why he didn't come back with me. Looking at her worried eyes and white hair, I just said he was busy with work. I also told her I was transferring to work abroad and wouldn't return for a long time. Before leaving, she held my hand reluctantly, telling me to take care, self-care is most important, and let emotions take their natural course. I couldn't hold back my tears, they surged out. The previous me, how didn't I learn this truth? Time flew, and there were only a few days left before going abroad. Soon, it was the day of the celebration banquet. After everyone ate, drank, and had fun, they all waited for Ethan to announce the director candidate. Eyes from all around fell on me, some even prepared to applaud. But I looked at Grace, after all, I had put her as the project leader. Yet I saw Ethan stand up, pull Michelle beside him, and say, the director candidate is Michelle. Then he looked at me, his gaze provocative. The whole room fell silent, those who had started applauding suddenly stopped, awkwardly looking at me. Only Michelle was smiling, shyly thanking Ethan, then smugly looking at me. Someone tried to smooth things over, chuckling and starting to congratulate Michelle. I frowned and stood up, but Grace grabbed my hand. She shook her head signaling to let it go, but I smashed the wine glass and questioned Ethan. Ethan sat down nonchalantly, crossing his legs, glancing at me, Michelle lacks security, of course, I have to give her the best. You're so petty, how can I let her be bullied under you? I laughed, protecting her so much, why not just give her the president's position? Occupying my labor fruits, what is that about? A gleam flashed in his eyes, he stared straight at me and said, "You're jealous?" Ethan said, casually standing up and walking towards me, whispering in my ear, "As long as you get along well with Michelle in the future, I can reconcile with you, and the director position can also be yours." I pushed him away, feeling blood rushing to my head. What I earned by ability, how did it become charity in his mouth? Still fantasizing about having a main wife and concubine, does he think he's an emperor? Don't disgust me, you two are locked for life. I said annoyedly. As for the director, I've resigned, it can only be Grace's. Ethan frowned, angrily saying, using resignation to force me? Do you think I'll believe it? Whether he believes or not, I pulled Grace and left. Anyway, I'll take this matter to the board. In the evening, my phone suddenly received messages from an unknown number. Aria, you dare to block me. Add me back quickly. Also, who allowed you to resign? I don't agree. This time I won't argue with you, tomorrow I'll move back, and then we'll get the certificate. I replied irritably, already broken up, stop barking. Sent, then blocked and deleted. Giving me the director as charity wasn't enough, he still wants to charity me a marriage. How did I not know before that Ethan was so arrogant? Before sleep, I received another message from an unknown number. I thought it was Ethan again, preparing to block and delete. But opening it, I found it was an intimate photo. Ethan lay drunkenly in Michelle's arms, Michelle half undressed, kissing his cheek. And not forgetting to warn me, don't entangle, he can only be mine. I smiled, turned off the phone, and slept. In a few days, I can escape this crazy couple. The next day at the company, Michelle sat swaggeringly in my office. All my things were cleared to a cardboard box in the corner, in a messy pile. Seeing me, she leaned back in the chair, arrogantly lifting her chin, pursing her lips, "Don't you know to knock before entering? Really no manners." I stepped forward 2 steps, angrily sweeping everything on her desk to the ground. The coffee on the desk spilled on her white skirt, causing her to scream. Walking out of the office, everyone gathered. "Aria, are you really resigning? Because of Michelle?" A gossipy colleague asked. "I am indeed resigning, but the director isn't something anyone can be." My gaze turned to Michelle, who ran to the president's office to complain. Grace pulled me to the pantry, whispering, "The board has sent someone, results will be out today." She glanced at the closed office over there, puzzled, what is Ethan thinking? Since he wants to retain you, why does he still favor Michelle blindly? Hey, she elbowed me, do you know why he let Michelle occupy your office? Seeing her mysterious look, I shook my head. It's because he promised the board that you won't resign, you'll work under Michelle, helping her be a good director. I was shocked, how could Ethan be so shameless? For Michelle, he really stops at nothing. Clearly just a poor student he sponsors, yet surpassing our childhood sweetheart relationship. I smiled self-mockingly. How could Ethan be so sure that I wouldn't resign, even agree to assist Michelle? Just because he's willing to secretly get the marriage certificate with me? Really giving him face. I contacted the board again, stating my position. Going to Ethan's office, only Michelle was sitting at the desk. She had just showered, wrapped in a bath towel, with Ethan's suit jacket over it. I noticed my photo originally on the desk was thrown in the trash. In its place was Michelle's photo. Brother Ethan went to get clothes for me, when he returns, I'll have him teach you a lesson. Michelle arrogantly walked up to me, her manicured finger provocatively poking my shoulder. I grabbed her wrist, disdainfully saying, picking up garbage I don't want, what's there to be proud of? I don't need to rely on anyone, I can still teach you a lesson. With that, I pushed her hard. Her lower back hit the desk edge, she glared at me hatefully, grabbed the nearby ashtray, and threw it at me. I couldn't dodge in time, the ashtray grazed my forehead, bringing pain. Michelle smiled maliciously, I stepped forward and slapped her with all my strength. The sound was crisp and pleasing, the red finger marks on her face were obvious, tears welling in her eyes. She picked up a fruit knife, raised it viciously. In my astonished gaze, she stabbed it hard into her own chest. At that moment, Ethan rushed in, pushing me away hard. "Michelle, are you okay?" He held Michelle distressfully in his arms. Michelle forced a smile, red-eyed. "It's my fault, always making sister angry, then I'll just die." Ethan picked her up horizontally, gave me an angry and disappointed look, and rushed out. Michelle, over his shoulder, gave me a provocative smile. I just pointed to the surveillance, her face changed. Trying to frame me without checking the environment. I picked up the photo from the trash and returned to my office. From the box in the corner, I picked up what I needed, the rest usable I gave to Grace. After receiving the board's reply that Grace would be director, I left the company. Vivian was hospitalized for stomach pain. I went to see her and ran into Ethan. His gaze swept over the porridge in my hand, frowning deeply. "Arya, you almost killed Michelle, and you have the nerve to come hypocritically with porridge?" When speechless, one really laughs in anger. Ethan thought I was visiting Michelle and bringing her porridge. Really funny, she courted death by stabbing herself, not killing herself is already thanks to heaven. Too lazy to waste words with him, I directly pulled up the office surveillance and showed him. In the video, Michelle blatantly provoked, crazily self-harming. After watching, Ethan's face changed unpredictably, his expression complex. He hesitated to speak, anger stuck in his chest, darkly looking at me. "If nothing, please move." He was blocking the corridor. I signaled him to step aside. "Aren't you here to see Michelle?" Ethan blocked my way again. I smiled and shook my head, too lazy to explain. But Ethan persisted, grabbing me and questioning, "Then who are you here to see? Male or female?" "None of your damn business." He choked, then said deeply, "Go apologize to Michelle first. No matter what, if you hadn't hit her first, she wouldn't have gotten excited and sought death." I pointed to the wound on my forehead, sneering, "Are you blind? Michelle provoked me first. Speaking of which, all this is thanks to you, forcing her into the director role, not only taking my office but also fantasizing I'd protect her." Ethan's face was ugly, but he couldn't refute. I bypassed him and walked straight. From the not fully closed door crack, I could see Michelle nervously looking out. Hilarious, in a way, they are mutually devoted. The next day, I came to pick Vivian up from the hospital and picked up a kitten by the roadside. We were discussing finding it a good home when we saw Ethan supporting Michelle back from a walk. That concerned look was particularly glaring. In the previous life, he wasn't this attentive when I was pregnant. Seeing me, he left Michelle, ran forward in a few steps, discharging, "I'll drive you." We hadn't spoken yet when Michelle behind him clutched her chest, crying out in pain. Ethan hurriedly turned back to support her, apologizing to us. "I'll send Michelle back first, wait for me." Vivian and I exchanged a smile, turned, and left. After sending Vivian home, I found someone to adopt the kitten. Grace said she has a Russian blue at home, perfect for companionship. Just going to the company to get the resignation contract and settle wages, I brought the kitten directly. Who knew, downstairs at the company, the kitten crazily jumped out of my arms onto a figure. "Ah!" Michelle screamed, grabbed the kitten, and smashed it toward the roadside. Just then, a car sped by. I was terrified, my legs uncontrollably weak. Rushing over to scoop up the kitten, it was still meowing, fortunately, not crushed by the car. With lingering fear, I roared at Michelle, "What madness are you in? It deserves to die. You deserve to die too. Who let you compete with me for brother Ethan?" Michelle crazily wanted to hit me but was already restrained by security. I soothed the kitten in my arms, noticing the spilled liquid on the ground. It was concentrated sulfuric acid. Michelle wanted to harm me, and the kitten saved me. There was surveillance at the door. I had someone call the police directly. "Michelle, you're really vicious. Wait to go to the police station." Michelle looked deranged, shouting, "Even if I die, I won't let you go. It's all your fault that brother Ethan left me alone in the hospital. She struggled relentlessly, glaring at me deadly, saying, brother Ethan can only be mine, I won't let you take him. I ignored her, drove the kitten to the vet. Only now did I realize Michelle might really be ill. After the doctor checked the kitten, confirming only minor injuries, I breathed a sigh of relief and gave the kitten to Grace. Vivian contacted me, saying that foolish rich second generation returned to the country, asking me to show him the house. On the drive back, thinking of Michelle, I still had palpitations. In the previous life, I even envied her for receiving so much favoritism from Ethan. I always thought she was just scheming green tea, now thinking, her suicides might have been real. She was originally such a madwoman. I even laughably sympathized with Ethan, after all, the one entangled with him is such a madwoman. After no longer obsessing over Ethan, I was like someone blind for a long time, suddenly healed. Once able to see the light, the pursuit in the darkness becomes unimportant. Back at the wedding house, that foolish rich second generation Vivian mentioned was already waiting. He had white hair, wore earrings, dressed fashionably. Indeed had that prodigal rich kid aura. Said to view the house, but he barely looked around and decided. The house hadn't transferred yet, but he transferred the money on the spot. Indeed generous, living up to his nickname. I smiled and flattered him. Just as we opened the door to leave, I saw Ethan suddenly appear. He looked me up and down, then relieved, Aria, it's great you're okay. I sent Michelle to the police, and he actually came to care about me. If you provoke me less, Michelle wouldn't go mad. I said coldly. Don't be angry, I promise to stay far from her in the future, let's reconcile. Ethan stepped forward, grabbing my hand. I shook it off disgustedly, stepping back 2 steps. Ethan was about to continue, but his gaze fixed on the man coming out behind me. His face changed, voice suddenly cold, who is this wild man? The rich second generation wanted to stay for the show, but I urged him to leave. Ethan wanted to step forward to hit him, but I blocked, impatiently saying, what right do you have to question me? Ethan, we've already broken up. His expression hurt, eyes reddening, you're protecting him? Did you break up with me because of him? Tears fell as he broke down, Aria, how can you insult me like this, bringing him back to our wedding house? I laughed, arms crossed looking at him, can't you be less double-standard, you can bring Michelle back, but I can't. Ethan frowned tightly, so, you're doing this to anger me? Aria, I've told you, Michelle is different, I just treat her as a sister. She's so pitiful with no one to rely on, since I sponsored her, I have to be responsible for her. You're an orphan too, why can't you be nicer to her? Ethan chattered endlessly, relentlessly blaming me, they were faultless, only I was wrong. I interrupted him, tiredly saying, your good sister repeatedly ruined my engagement banquets and even threw sulfuric acid at me. Am I some cheap person? She's treated me like this, and I should still eagerly be good to her? Are you sick? Messing with your own sister is your business, don't drag me in. Ethan's face turned green and white, still stubbornly, Michelle and I aren't the relationship you think, don't talk nonsense. I laughed, whether it is, you know best? If I hadn't come back that night, dare you say you wouldn't have climbed into bed with her? I stared straight into his eyes, Ethan felt guilty under my gaze, turning his head. He stumbled back 2 steps, shaking his head in self-deception. After a long time, he looked up, hoarsely, don't measure a gentleman's heart with a villain's mind. I don't have those filthy thoughts. Ethan's eyes were red, firmly, from beginning to end, the one I love is only you, the one I'll marry is only you. I've said, for Michelle, it's just sympathy. I sneered, too lazy to continue arguing. Anyway, Ethan and I have no possibility. Whether his feelings for Michelle are sympathy or love, I don't want to get involved anymore. The original plan to leave on the 3rd of next month was changed to the 1st. Vivian handled work in advance, and I successfully resigned. The night before leaving, she arranged another small gathering, inviting a few close friends as a send-off for us. In her family's bar private room, the handsome male massages from last time were arranged again. This time just light drinking, stopping appropriately, going home on time. But unexpectedly insomniac, thinking of leaving familiar places for a strange country. There was anticipation and reluctance. The next day, we set off early for the airport. Before turning off the phone, I received Ethan's message, "Aria, if you leave that man, I'll send Michelle away, then we'll marry." I didn't care, treating it as spam. Upon arriving, Vivian and I laughed simultaneously. The previous trace of unease was thrown behind, leaving only full enthusiasm. We entered the company, showing our skills. Busy negotiating collaborations, adapting to local life. In rest time, we took time to visit various tourist spots. Months later, I heard from Grace that Ethan was almost going crazy looking for me. I discarded the domestic card as soon as I got off the plane. Naturally, he couldn't contact me. A few close friends kept silent about it. Ethan harassed them daily. Once chatting with Grace, somehow Ethan grabbed the phone, his voice hoarse, "Aria, I miss you so much, come back, okay? You don't like Michelle, I've sent her away, come back. Come back and we'll marry." I hung up. When he called again, I turned off the phone. What's the point? What's the point of saying this now? I've moved forward, won't look back. Later, Ethan still tried to contact me. To avoid trouble, I changed numbers again. Working day and night with Vivian, the company received several large investments and developed good partners. Of course, work involves overtime leading to hair loss and social engagements. But we enjoy it. Enduring work hardship is better than love's hardship. After acquiring a company, we went for a celebratory meal. But encountered harassment. A blonde greasy man kept secretly photographing us with his phone. He also laughed and came forward wanting to hug us for photos. After refusal, he became furious, and with his companions, forcefully tried to drag me away. Vivian immediately got angry, smashed a wine bottle on the man's head, cursing, "You Yankee, stinking scum, I'll kill you." Company colleagues also surrounded, everyone united, beating them black and blue. After they fled in disgrace, everyone laughed heartily. Laughing and laughing, I laughed to tears. Vivian teased smilingly, "No need to be so moved. The previous life's me, trapped in love, would never have thought I could have such a carefree birthday. Free, vibrant, and exhilarating." Back at the apartment, unexpectedly saw Ethan. He stood there travel-worn, as if centuries had passed since last seen. I don't know how he found here. Besides annoyance, I have no feelings for him anymore. Ethan approached awkwardly, much thinner, eyes full of fatigue. "Aria, you've changed a lot," he finally said. I smiled. "Yes, leaving you, I've become better." Now I'm confident and radiant, while around Ethan, I was consumed and dim. Silence spread between us. Finally, Ethan said, "This place is pretty good, the company plans to expand business here, then we can see each other often." I didn't answer, pulled the door open, and went in. Now, Ethan is a familiar stranger to me. Whatever he does, I don't care. As long as it doesn't affect me, I'll treat him like a fart and let it go. After that day, Ethan often flew between places. He rented a house nearby, often chatting with me casually. Mostly I ignored him, he wasn't annoyed. Instead, he became patient, just like with Michelle. But the flowers and gifts he sent were all thrown away by me. I never accepted any invitations. Over time, he'll naturally get tired. Just like me, love without response will gradually wither. Indeed, not long after, Ethan disappeared from my life. It was much later that I learned from Grace that Ethan ultimately married Michelle. After Michelle was sent abroad by him, she ran back. She secretly drugged Ethan and soon got pregnant. Ethan's world collapsed. He got drunk every day, breaking down crying in front of friends. "Can't go back, Aria will never forgive me." Grace sighed. "Michelle is not one to worry less about. Good you didn't marry Ethan." At this moment, I also felt fortunate. I escaped the shackles of the previous life, not sandwiched between them. Living the way I should have. Later, the Dean mother passed away. I went back once. After the funeral, Ethan found me. He rubbed his face, choking, "Sorry, Arya. After marriage, I learned Michelle's purity and kindness were all pretended." Ethan with a mournful face, broke down, "You don't know, she's driving me crazy. The one I want to marry is only you. It's all because I drank that wine, I mistook her for you." Ethan cried as he spoke. Seeing no response, he raised his voice, "But how could you be so heartless, leaving just like that, and selling our wedding house? I know all, that man was the buyer, but how could you sell the house without discussing with me? Now I don't even have a memento." He constantly accused and regretted. My heart was unmoved. Wanted to comfort but not sincerely. So I remained silent. Michelle hurriedly came, seeing me, rushed over like crazy. Her belly was already bulging, yet she recklessly shouted and cursed at me. Ethan blocked her, sternly scolding, "Can't you stop acting like a shrew?" "One sentence," Michelle cried. She grabbed Ethan tightly, hysterically, "You really can't forget her. I'm your wife, you're mine, why are you protecting her?" Ethan frowned irritably, but saw blood flowing under Michelle. He panicked, holding her and left. I didn't think about this farce anymore, booked the evening flight back. The branch Vivian manages has attracted her father's attention, verbally suppressing her, telling her to assist her brother well in the future. She and I have a long road ahead. Ethan's recollections. Later, I recalled countless times. When did Arya plan to leave me? Thinking back, I think it was the day of the third engagement banquet. Her gaze, so cold, seemed to hate me thoroughly, wishing to stay far away. But I was oblivious then. Still immersed in Michelle's gentle words. As soon as she cried, I softened. For her, I hurt Arya repeatedly. Even broke up with Arya for her, gave Arya's director position to her. I regret so much. What I regret most is misunderstanding Arya, cheating with a wild man that day, not retaining her. But when I realized, she had left. Disappeared without a trace. Even sold our wedding house. Left nothing. Not even a memento for me. After being driven out by her that day, I sulked with her, waiting for her to beg me back. Unexpectedly, what came was her blocking and deleting, proposing breakup, her silent departure. I chased her friends daily asking, but no one told me her whereabouts. It was later, hearing Grace on the phone, that I gradually learned she went abroad. She didn't leave in anger, nor to another city, but to distant abroad. I went crazy. Arya really doesn't want me, no matter how I beg, she won't return. But Michelle said, "Sister doesn't want you, I'll accompany you forever." It's all Michelle's fault, she interfered in my relationship with Arya. This time I didn't soften to her tears, insisted on sending her abroad. Only then will Arya forgive me. After many twists, I found Arya. She changed so much, like back to when we just started dating. So vibrant. Suddenly, I felt timid, fearing her rejection. So, I planned to expand overseas market, to be closer to her. It's okay, one day she'll forgive me. I comforted myself thus. But just as I planned to shift work focus overseas, Michelle ran back. She schemed to drug me, got pregnant with my child. On live stream, she cried, threatening suicide, forcing me to marry her. Company stock price affected, I had to marry her. But in my heart, always thinking of Arya, the one I should marry is her. I couldn't face her, could only get drunk. Only when drunk did Michelle become Arya. But Michelle was angry that I treated her as a substitute. She deleted all Arya's photos from my phone, even insisted on going with me on every business trip. During overtime negotiating deals, she barged in regardless of occasion. Afraid I'd rekindle with Arya. But she didn't know, now I don't dare appear before Arya. Until Arya returned for the dean's funeral, I had the courage to see her. But my regret and pain couldn't elicit a ripple from her. Michelle ridiculously went crazy at her, but ended up causing her own miscarriage. Doctor said her uterine lining is thin, hard to get pregnant again in this life. Knowing this, Michelle crazily attempted suicide. After rescue, she blamed me, blamed Arya. She ranted daily, saying the one who died in difficult birth should be Arya. Really crazy. Finally, I threw her into a mental hospital. Live or die, up to her. I was muddled daily, lost several big orders, got fired by the company. Finally holed up at home drinking all day, stomach problems arose. Only when drunk did I dream. In dreams, Arya married me, we had a child. Family of 3, very happy. But suddenly gas explosion, flames soaring, shattering my beautiful dream. In a daze, I saw Arya lying bloodied on the operating table. So, in the previous life, she married me but lived unhappily. Therefore, in this life, she doesn't want me. I lay in the sea of fire, burned by flames, but felt no pain. Only praying Arya lives a long life this time.